were lucky enough to catch up with Rohima Begum at SCC, and we had a fascinating conversation covering a lot of topics under the umbrella of diversity. And I do hope that you learn as much as I did from Rohima today. Today we are lucky enough to be joined by Rohima Begum. Hi Rohima, could you set the scene for us please?
Hi Matt, thank you for having me here today. I'm currently working as a vendor marketing manager at SCC. So I manage the relationship between partners and SCC from a marketing perspective by planning, budgeting and delivering joint campaigns. I've been working at SCC for 3 years now and within the tech industry. And within that time, I've been fortunate enough to have been promoted from marketing executive to marketing manager. I've also project managed CRM award-winning events, and recently I've been nominated for CRM Women in Tech. So
congratulations.
Brilliant, thank you.
We have discussed leading up to this interview or conversation around your concept of the 3 degrees of marginalisation, which knocked me for 6 when you went through that. just fantastically candid. But I think you want to say something before we get into those 3 areas.
Yes, of course. So before we talk about the 3 degrees of marginalisation which may impact me, I'd also like to consider intersectionality, which put simply is the concept of all oppression is linked. Intersectionality is the acknowledgement that everyone has their own unique experiences of discrimination.
Okay, so could you maybe share with us the 3 degrees of marginalisation?
Okay, so people may experience marginalisation for various reasons, but for me personally, I have experienced marginalisation around 3 particular areas which impact me, and it would be my gender, being a woman, race, I'm of a South Asian background, and disability, I don't have a right arm and wear a prosthetic. However, I fully appreciate there are many other degrees of marginalisation, such as age, sexuality, gender identity, hidden disabilities. Hidden disabilities don't have physical signs and include learning difficulties, mental health, as well as mobility, speech, visual and hearing impairments. For example, autism, epilepsy, chronic pain, and so much more. I only recently learned people with hidden disabilities wear sunflower lanyards and cards to show they may need additional support. Like everyone else, I'm always seeking to understand and address any unconscious biases I may have towards these issues.
What I'd like to do is talk about the first marginalisation, and one that's less obvious, I guess, to people who haven't met you in real life, face to face, or have only ever seen you on Teams. I have a story
head up.
Exactly, yeah. So I have a story for you. The first time, or one of the first times that we met, we were at the PCR Awards, and as is industry standard, we'd had a few drinks. We go on to the sort of party afterwards, and there's a DJ playing, and everyone's on the dance floor, and a certain young chap who, I won't embarrass him, and because that would be that wouldn't be right. Went off, asked you for a dance, and off you went. You had a great time, had a dance. I would say about 10 or 15 minutes later, he wandered back over to us, and he was absolutely freaked out. And he went, "I don't know what to do. I'm really embarrassed." "Well, what's up, mate? What's up?" "Rohima." "Yeah, what's up with Rohima?" "She's only got one arm."
That's brilliant.
And me and the person I was stood with, who you know very well, we were in hysterics. "What's the problem, mate?" He went, "I think I pulled her prosthesis." No, well, I'm sure she's used to it, mate. It's fine. She's very. This won't be a surprise to her. Go back and.
Well, it didn't come unhinged, so you mustn't have pulled it that hard.
So your disability means that you've come across discrimination, and do you have any examples of that you could share?
Yeah, so when I graduated, and I graduated in 2008 when there was this big economic crash, and every graduate was looking for a job and finding it extremely difficult. And as you can imagine, being someone who's not only a woman of a South Asian background, has a disability, all the stats were against me. Now, I applied to many companies and many agencies, and I went to one agency for an interview where they asked me about my typing speed and whether or not my typing had been affected because I type with one hand. And they proceeded to do a speed test, and my results came out average. And I was like, well, of course it's average. I've been typing with one hand all my life.
Mm.
It's going to be average.
Not the first
So
time you've seen a keyboard, was it? I mean,
yeah, of course. So things like that I've encountered. But unfortunately, the statistics show that 1 in 4 disabled people are only likely to be working. Although the tech industry is a prolific job generator, yet the nation's unemployment rate for people with disabilities is 2.5 times higher for those without, even though companies that are inclusive of individuals with disabilities are more financially successful. So these kind of stats do stand against you sometimes, and you just think, well, why are these issues coming across time and time again? So some people like to be labelled as differently abled because although they might struggle to do certain things, they do it in a different way to how able-bodied people would do it. So some people prefer to be labelled differently abled, but I think for myself, because I've been ingrained into the word disability, I've just become used to it, and I'm just accepting
it's
of
just
it, and I
easier
just
to
see it
use,
more
I
of
guess.
a description.
Yeah. Is there anything that people do that make you feel less comfortable or more comfortable? You know, how do you want to be treated?
Somebody came to shake my hand during a meeting, and there were like 20 people at that meeting. Now, he straight away realized that I couldn't shake with my right hand. I had to shake with my left hand. And he asked me why. And I said, it's because I have a prosthetic. I can't shake your hand with my right hand. And he proceeded to ask questions about the disability throughout for a good 10-15 minutes, and I thought, I just want to proceed with the meeting at hand. We're holding everyone back, and it's getting really awkward for them. I mean, I'm happy to have a conversation with you separately if you want, but it's
Do you think
just,
that was nerves and his way of coping
I
because he
think it
thought
might
he'd
have been.
embarrassed you, or
Yeah, I think it might have been. And for me as well, I wouldn't want anyone else to feel awkward. So
yeah.
if he wanted to proceed the conversation later on, I would have been happy to do so.
Yeah. Do you think your disability has made you more determined?
I think so. Yeah. So I've always been really resilient, and particularly if someone says to me something like, "Oh, you can't swim," or "You can't drive," like, yeah, I can. It might take me a bit longer to learn to do those things, but I absolutely can do that. I'll find a way of doing it.
So, Rahima, we're going to talk about an issue which has been around forever, and has thankfully got an awful lot of focus recently. It's under the umbrella of diversity, but specifically gender equality, and even more specifically, given the industry we're in, women in tech. So, could you give us your perspective, please?
So, before I did this interview, I did some research, and I read an article around the lack of women in tech, which has been a constant debate for decades within the industry. But diversity means much more than only gender. From disability to age, ethnic groups, diversity is multifaceted. And by not acting to include all groups in their business, organizations in the tech industry are losing out on massive untapped potential that they should actively embrace. businesses in the tech sector that want to innovate and thrive must pay close attention to the makeup of their workforces. There was this stat that I read that in 2015, companies that have high levels of diversity outperformed their competitors by 35%. Now, to me, that's a damning statistic and just tells you how much diversity has a positive impact within companies. So I love the fact that the women in tech debate is being had within the industry. I think it's an important issue which needs to be addressed. And to give you an example, both myself and a friend of mine, a male friend of mine, applied for a job in the tech industry. And during the interview, I was asked how I would handle grumpy old men, whereas my friend wasn't asked this question. So my response was, I've worked in male-dominated industries since graduating, from construction, manufacturing, and now technology. So handling grumpy old men is okay for me. I mean, it's not a huge challenge. It's the same as handling any other person, I guess. But I think the fact that that question was even asked to me and not my friend was a bit like, well, why was that the case? And it made me question why people addressing these kind of questions to a woman specifically rather than a man, as well as a man.
Yeah, or they're telling you that they've got an issue.
Yes, yeah, and it was very telling, and I'm really glad I didn't get the job, to be honest.
Yeah, it was probably a red flag to you rather than
Yes, definitely. Yeah, it's a sign of their culture for sure. But if we look at this at a global scale, there's a huge gender gap in unemployment. The current global labour force participation rate for women is close to 49%, whereas for men it's 75%. If we look at the tech industry, 5% of leadership positions are held by women. Women earn 28% less than their male colleagues in the same tech roles. And I think education is key, as currently only 3% of girls study STEM subjects, so science, tech, and engineering and manufacturing, whereas these subjects are studied by 15% of boys. So more girls need to be encouraged and inspired to study these subjects to address these disparities. And I think crucially, we need to make the sector more attractive to women, as there are few industries that offer a more creative, better paid, and interesting career path. Yet the message isn't getting out there. Part of the problem is that there are so few women studying technology-related degrees.
So that leads us rather neatly into your third degree of marginalisation, being race. Have you directly experienced racial discrimination?
Yeah, so to give you an example, years ago, a manager of mine hired a temp without interviewing her, and within a few hours of her coming into the office, instructed me to, quote, get rid of her because she has an Indian accent. I was in the early years of my career and very, very docile, so did as she instructed, but absolutely felt awful about it. And I wish at that time I challenged her about it, and I still do at this right now.
So let's pop you in a time machine, take you back. That person has asked you to do that awful thing again. You get your chances to say something to that person. What do you want to say to them?
Why don't we monitor this person's performance based on the work that they do, not their accent? If they're able to execute marketing campaigns, talk to people, this person spoke English fluently. If they're able to execute marketing campaigns and write emails, communicate with people, let's just monitor the performance for about a week or so and then decide whether or not we should, quote, get rid of her.
So have you experienced that level of discrimination personally?
Yeah, so when I was working in this company where I was one of few people from an ethnic minority background, there was a lot of language and a lot of talk that made me feel a bit uncomfortable. For example, they would talk about immigration issues, and one of the things that was said was a plane was flying over the office one day, and they were like, "Oh, here's some more coming over to take our jobs." Now, that made me feel incredibly unwelcome and uncomfortable, as you can imagine.
You shared with us the 3 degrees of marginalisation and the challenges that they presented to you, Rohima. I'm wondering if there are any positive aspects to those.
Yeah, so one of the most positive experiences I've had in my career is within SCC, and credit to SCC's marketing team, who over the years I've been there have included the most diverse bunch of people, including ethnicities, age, gender, and sexuality. Whilst working within SCC and interacting with people from the channel, I've also come across women in tech who I admire and consider my role models. For example, my predecessor, Nicola Yupi, who I still talk to and consider a mentor. She recently wrote a blog around women doing their own PR. Marlene Spenceley, who has done her own Tech in Her Word series, and at SCC, Sarah Wilkes and Kat Hill, who manage and lead service delivery and technical teams, as well as in our marketing team, Gabrielle Barthélemy, Emily O'Connell, Lucy Hughes. Whenever I'm on calls or in meetings with any of these people, I'm in awe of their intelligence, their confidence, their assertiveness, and they inspire me to do a better role in my job. I also think it's important to have mentoring and support from fellow male colleagues in senior positions. And fortunately for me, Tim Kenny, my manager, and Chris Leng, who we all know is a channel rock star in my view, have been great sources of support.
That's great. I can now see Chris sitting there smiling as being described as a rock star, probably for the first time in his life, despite his history, I might add.
Yes, I'm sure.
We all have a responsibility to tackle issues around diversity, and I'm very interested to hear on your view on what action can be taken by absolutely everybody, regardless of gender, race, sexuality, etc.
So, well, everyone has their own unique experiences of discrimination and oppression, and we must consider everything and anything that can marginalize people. So we need to have an intersectional lens. Without this, our efforts to tackle inequalities and injustices towards people are likely to just end up perpetuating systems of inequalities. We also need to ensure there is representation within the industry, and one of the reasons I gladly agreed to do this interview, despite my crippling nerves, was that I hope someone or some people were able to identify with me. As we know, lack of representation can affect people's lives from their emotional well-being, mental health, societal outcomes. It affects people's aspirations, education. So if you don't see me reflected in the world around you, your value and your treatment of me will reflect that. But crucially, make diversity part of your corporate culture. As I think I've mentioned before, in a report that I read, it states that companies that have high levels of diversity outperform their competitors by 35%. So businesses in the tech sector that want to innovate and thrive need to pay attention to close attention to the makeup of their workforces.
Rohima, would you be happy for anybody who's watched this conversation to reach out to you and have answer any questions? Or are you happy to answer any questions?
Absolutely. They can find me on LinkedIn. Happy to talk to anyone around this.
Awesome. That's awesome. Rohima, I want to thank you so much for your time this afternoon. It's been incredibly powerful. It's been insightful. And I hope that that everybody gets to see this conversation and takes as much from it as I have. Thank you, Rohima, for your time.
So.
I really appreciate it.
No, thank you, Matt. It's been brilliant. I've enjoyed it.
That's great. Thanks, Rohima. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.